Welcome to Hell of a Picture, a weekly podcast where we discuss movies and films and cinema, and if they get the distinction of our Hell of a Picture, sort of like our own version of Two Thumbs Up.
That's right.
Yeah. And we didn't have a Hell of a Picture last week because we did part one of our Dune two-parter. So stick around and you'll hear if Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2, or Dune as the collective, is a hell of a picture.
That's right.
My name's Andrew Bartlett, and I'm sitting across each other from David Hollinshurst. We're in person.
Still here. Still talking Dune.
We haven't left here all week. We've just been on this.
That's right.
We just decided to finally press record again.
That's right.
We're just sitting here, withering away.
Just waiting to talk Dune.
Yeah, like the Fremen on Arceus. What is it?
Arrakis.
Arrakis.
Yeah. Be preserved by the geriatric spice. So we have not aged, but we have sat here high as balls, just tripping on spice.
Hallucinating, predicting the future.
That's right.
You know, all the fun spice things.
Yeah, planning a jihad.
That's right.
The usual.
So last week we got heavy into Dune discussion, talked a lot about the idea of Dune being an adaptation and sort of, Denis Villeneuve's ideas that he brought forth with respect to Frank Herbert's novel. And we talked a lot about the production design, and we were sort of left off on discussing this as sort of a two-parter, whether this is it was obviously released and they were made different times. They weren't made the same time. A lot of movies these days will be like, okay, we're going and doing this Hobbit trilogy. We're going to do all three of them at the same time, and we're going to shoot it over 19 years. But this was very much a case of they shot Dune, always sort of planned to have a second one, and then at least a second one, but we're sort of waiting to see if it was a success at the box office, which it was, and then I think it was after the first weekend. Yeah, after the first weekend of it's released, Dune Part 1. I guess the producers called Denis Villeneuve and were like, "Yep, we're going number 2. Get it going." And he started like calling up the production designers and cinematographers. Got
on the phone with Timothée Chalamet right away.
Like, we're doing it again. Lock it down. And then
had to pull Timothée Chalamet from he was probably showered with models or something like that. That's the life I imagine Timothée Chalamet lives.
Man, he is really taking off.
Playing Bob Dylan.
He is playing Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we were actually just talking about musical biopics and our kind of growing fatigue with them. But I might have to give Timothée Chalamet a shot, just for the sake, for friendship.
What is this number? This is the 4th Dylan biopic?
I don't know.
Who even knows? Or maybe there was just a bunch of. It was that movie, I'm Not Here or I'm Not There.
Yeah, which was very abstract. It wasn't a traditional biopic by any means, because 5 different people play him in that movie, and it's not like a sort of. It wasn't like a continuous narrative. It was kind of like this weird, episodic short film interpretation of ideas. It was pretty gnarly. It was pretty gnarly. Yeah.
But another musical biopic, Elvis, and that's what we see in Part 2 of Dune.
Mm-hmm.
Austin.
Yeah, Elvis features prominently in Part 2 of Dune.
And here comes Elvis.
Yeah, that's right. We get some blue suede shoes. It makes perfect sense. If you read the books, you have to read the books to understand why Elvis is in there. Right.
And who is this person? But Elvis was in Dune 2049.
I'm sorry? Blade Runner 2049.
What did I say? Dune 2049?
You did, yeah, that's right.
Blade Runner 2049. We've been here for a week, so what do you want from me? Elvis was in Dune 2049.
Again, Blade Runner 2049.
Blade Runner. Jesus Christ. He was in Blade Runner 2049.
I didn't know that. Okay, but who was he?
You remember when they're in the casino.
Oh, the actual Elvis. Okay, I thought you were talking about Austin Butler, the man who played Elvis. So I wouldn't put it
past, Denis Villeneuve in Dune to actually throw in, this is an old, artifice from...
Yeah, there's this archived video of this. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
oh, man.
So as I was saying, we don't have a rundown this week. Obviously, we gave you the rundown last week.
Thank God.
It was long and winded. And if you haven't listened to part 1 of this little 2-parter, make sure you go back and listen to it because we're gonna dive right into the movies again. Yeah. And you know, we pulled a lot from last week talking about you know, the production design and just the you know, I use the word the language of the film, right, and the kind of creating this ancient language, this ancient idea of what the films sort of how they present them and what they draw upon, and they pull on this inspiration. You made a great you mentioned the how what was it, the you know, not pulling from the internet.
Yeah. Exactly.
So like pulling from art, pulling from just like the library, from books, from like physical objects, from everything. But this film also pulls a lot from history and culture.
Absolutely. No, it definitely does. And like, yeah, the most obvious of which being, well, you have Arrakis. Kind of sounds like and is meant to be Iraq. And the precious commodity only found there, you know, is sort of, it's an analog for oil. And that's pretty well established, right? And this was written in the late 50s, early 60s. So that was probably a lot more subtle and clever then than it is now. But,
that's right.
But contained within that is a lot of commentary on colonialism and, like, you know, the rapacious attitude that Western powers have taken when dealing with that region. You know, the Empire in this movie, they just, without any consultation with the Fremen, they're just like, okay, the Harkonnens, you're in charge of Dune. Doesn't matter what anyone else has to say about it. Like, we're making this call unilaterally. Now the Atreides are in charge of Dune. And again, no consultation with the indigenous peoples. And in a work of fiction, this is like the least fictional thing ever. Like, you know, like right. If you know, the Arab world could look at this and be like, yeah, that's what happened and continues to happen. Right. Specifically for Herbert's inspiration, I think, you know, after World War I, you had the fall of the Ottoman Empire, which ruled the Middle East for a long, long time. And after which the Western powers basically just stood over a map and said, okay, the French, you get this part, and we'll draw a border here, and England, you get that. And, you know, without any consideration for cultural, linguistic, or religious, you know, diversity of the area, they just redrew the maps. And in a lot of cases, like the case of Iraq, you know, this had immediate and long-lasting consequences. So you had 3 distinct peoples living, you know, around you, sort of separately, but near each other, the Sunnis, Shiites, and Kurds. And now they're all just sort of thrown together. And this contributed not only to sort of, you know, strife in the short term, but a lot of cascading issues that we have seen into today, ideas of nationalism in the area and extremism. And, you know, you see that very clearly, this kind of this lack of this thoughtlessness on behalf of the Empire as it relates to indigenous peoples of Dune.
And this can clearly be seen in Dune,
yes,
like obviously. But part 2 of the film really does focus a lot on the Fremen.
Yes,
you know, you spend a long time with them. The first film, we're not so much with them a ton. Where you know, you obviously are, but like the film ends and they're accepting Paul and his mother kind of into their tribe, or at least on the surface, because
he killed a dude.
Yeah,
that's you're in.
Yeah. You know, so he's you know, they accept him, and I mean, that's the beginning of the second film, is sort of that moment, and they're just taking them to their tribe, and
exactly.
And but you spend a lot of time, and you get to see a lot of the again, this world of like this ancient world that is in the future. Sort of keep going back to that.
But it is an interesting dichotomy, and it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah. And while we're there, you know, we sort of see, you know, you sort of see this idea of, okay, you have the Atreides, you have the Harkonnens, you have the Fremen, you see all these like houses, these groups of tribes, I guess, and how they're all separated. But then you kind of get within the tribe, and because we're spending time with Fremen, and then you're like, wait a minute, the Fremen are divided in how they interpret the prophecy or the Messiah, or just their culture. And you sort of realize, oh yeah, it's like, you know, you had mentioned how, how the redividing up of the Middle East sort of thing, and just like, you have a tendency to be, all right, like, it's like, well, we're American or we're Canadian or we're like, English or French or whatever. And then you sort of like, oh, they're all another entity, right?
Yes, yeah.
Another country. And like, you don't really realize that within that country, it's like just seeing it in the States now. It's like, you could say, yeah, okay, everybody in America is like, yeah, you're all American. But then like there's this stark, obviously,
is there division in America?
Division within there, and
it's not talked about very much, though, I guess. Yeah.
And we're seeing that we see this in the films, right? Where it's the Fremen, you have the fundamentalists from the South. North, yes,
and even within the northern tribes
right,
too. There's aspects of that for sure. Yeah.
The Javier Bardem obviously being sort of the leader of that.
Yeah,
and then you have this sort of like rationalists, I guess, like or just more so like, I'm fighting for the Fremen, I'm not fighting for a Messiah figure or this person that's going to come save us. Like, that's not why I'm fighting. I'm fighting because I want to. This is we're indigenous to this planet. This is ours. So you definitely get that. But this idea of the prophecy is something obviously that the fundamentalists are staunchly behind.
Yeah,
and they are adamant that this is, that Paul is the prophet promised or the Messiah that is going to come from the outer world that's going to come and save them.
Absolutely.
Can you kind of talk a little bit more about the idea of how that's presented in the film and this idea of the prophecy?
Yeah, I mean, like religion and prophecy do play a huge part in this story, and once again, like you say, aspects were omitted. There's actually like a space Catholicism in Dune in the novels as well, which they don't get. Yeah, they don't get into it all in the movie. That's fine. That's fine. We don't have time to get into that. What is wild though is that people know, the Fremen know, certain like factions among them, and everyone. It's sort of common knowledge that the messianic story that Paul is fulfilling was planted by the Bene Gesserit, by their missionaries. And yet they still believe in it. There's this weird compartmentalization, kind of like a cognitive dissonance, that sounds unbelievable, except when you realize that like people, like this actually happens. People can be simultaneously aware of things that are conflicting and yet will sort of disregard that and believe what they believe. And the book and the movie, much like us over the last few episodes, is not kind on messiahs. We've talked about messiahs a bit lately, and we've kind of been hard on them, and justifiably so. And I think, the hero in this, you talked about there's aspects of the Fremen who are more rationalist, and you see that in Chani.
Yes.
Chani, it's sort of like this humanist ideal. We are not going to depend on God. We're not going to wait around for a messiah. We are going to rely on us, the Fremen for the Fremen. And we are going to fight back. We are going to claim it. We're not going to wait for God or prophecy or whatever. And though that differs a little bit from the book, I think it's a really cool thing to do in the movie because it does preserve the spirit of the book and the idea of the book. And her character, Chani, is very emblematic, I think, of what Herbert was trying to get across in his books.
Yeah, the idea that Chani is I mean, they obviously have a love, like they're in love in the books.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, they are. Yeah.
I sort of flirt with the idea, like, is this sort of similar to the Matrix when like Trinity, the Trinity character, Neo is the one, he's the Messiah, he's going to come, he's the one or the chosen one, whatever. And, the Trinity character is interesting because then her prophecy when she sees the oracle is you're going to fall in love with the one. And that's what I couldn't get out of my head watching this.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Like Shani falls in love with Paul, but is that part of her prophecy? Like, I don't know, because it's sort of not really alluded to or talked about, but like, she's like, I have a difficulty with her character in that, he sort of like lines it up for her and sort of tells her what's going to happen. whether you believe that he is the Messiah or not, he obviously has this ability to foresee things.
Yes, he does.
Like he has the dreams at the beginning of the first film.
Yep.
And then after he sort of goes through the, the ceremony where he drinks the water of life.
Yeah.
His visions become clear.
Yes.
And he, not unlike the MCU where Doctor Strange can go and see 1,000 or 1,000,000 different outcomes for the battle with Thanos.
Mm-hmm.
This is he can see sort of the future, and he can see the path that he needs to take. And he even says to her at one point, he says, I'm afraid that, and this is kind of before he takes the water of life, but he's like, I'm afraid that if I fulfill this, or if I do this, I'm going to lose you.
Mm-hmm.
And she sort of reassures him. He's like, no, I'm going to love you. I'm going to be here. And then she's like, well, no. Then he's like, okay, well, this is what I have to do.
Yeah.
This is what I have to do. This is the only way that it's going to save you and save the Fremen and save everything.
Yeah.
I have to essentially be a dick Messiah.
Yeah.
And she, instead of just sort of realizing that, she's like, no, I don't want you to be a dick. But she, the saving thing is sort of in the script where then she says to him, as long as you stay true to yourself.
Right.
Or stay true. And then he obviously doesn't. So that's sort of, I'm very conflicted under her character, her reaction to that. But also just his character, like, does he actually believe it? It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, it is kind of tough to reconcile Paul, because
in the books, is he sort of presented that way? Like, is he like, I'm the Messiah, and like, yes, I am.
No, like he has reservations about the whole thing. That's sort of captured. Now, it's been a while since I've read the original, but yeah, like he does have reservations about it. He understands the inherent danger in what he's doing,
right?
But he is also he cares about the Fremen. He is sincere in that, but he is also motivated by revenge. He is selfish.
Right.
Revenge is always selfish at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It is always a selfishly driven idea and motivation. And it's interesting that you see in this how prophecy is used to manipulate people, but how people will also manipulate prophecy while still also believing in it. It's like Stilgar does this on a few occasions. Like he basically compels Paul and Jessica to go along with the idea, or else they'll be killed. Like he says that, he presents them with the ultimatum. It's like, you are, or you die. Like it's that in that great Javier Bardem way. And it's this idea that he wants a prophet more than he wants truth.
Right.
And because of what...
Yeah, he's blinded by it, 100%.
And I think he sees opportunity, too, to a degree. Even though he is a zealot, he does believe in this stuff. He's also, to a degree, a pragmatist. I think he understands that this represents a great opportunity that may not come again. And he manipulates his beliefs in the prophecy and adapts everything. Like when Paul denies being the Messiah, Stilgar goes, "Oh, look how humble he is. Oh, he must be. Like, of course, Lisan al-Gaib would not say that he is Lisan al-Gaib, And so there's this, this
in the mouse scene when he says he's going to be the little mouse. His name is going to be Usul or whatever, and he's like, no. It's very smart. He's it's like everything he does,
absolutely,
he can justify.
Mm-hmm.
But there is some sort of. Can't deny it, right? Like he can foresee things like that. The scene where he is kind of in front of all the Fremen and they're like, you can't be here. You have to kill. And he's like, no, I'm not going to kill him. And then he kind of gets in the rant and then he starts kind of pointing out people. Yeah. And saying like, like I can't remember what he says, but it's like, your mother did this or whatever. And then he's like, oh my God. And it's like, okay, so now he actually can see things and he is like a prophet.
Oh, yeah. No, he does have the sight. Like he's always had, like you said, he had the dreams on Dune and stuff like that. And this is an inheritance from his mother.
Correct.
And she has trained him in that. But then as soon as he inhales spice, it gets enhanced a little bit. And then when he, takes the water of life, it happens even more. And he does sort of realize that whether or not he is a messiah to the Fremen in the truest sense, because that was kind of a fabrication of the Bene Gesserit. Right. He is the Kwisatz Haderach. So he is the fulfillment of their eugenic experiment. So he is a prophet. He is a messiah in that sense. Like he is the one in that way. So whether there is truth to this, this prophecy on Arrakis, or that was just a lie created by the Bene Gesserit. It's an interesting sort of aspect of prophecy. The prophecy can be true or not, a prophecy can be fulfilled if people want it to be and work towards it, right? So it is that cool concept. And yeah, like he knows that if he follows through with this, there will be bloody terror in his name. He sees the jihad to come, which is what we get, which is what happens. They cut a bloody swath across the galaxy, and billions of people die. And he eventually, like he resists it a bit, but eventually he kind of accepts it. And you sort of see this idea that a figurehead of a prophecy or a religion, it can get away from them. They lead it for a time, but then it gets to a point where it leads them. And this is kind of reminiscent of historical events like Martin Luther and the Reformation and things like that. And again, you see the draw on history and that Herbert used and his influences. But yeah, this is a very real thing that, and it leaves Paul behind, and he can't control it after a while. So it's super cool commentary on prophecy and Messiah. And like we talked about earlier, Herbert's opinions on leaders in government. He's not a fan. Like Paul is not meant to be the hero in this case. Like you shouldn't love him too much. Yes, you should like him, but
And that's what that's one thing too. It's like when you're talking about like it's that moment when he's battling Austin Butler's character.
The unpronounceable Harkonnen name,
So Rhea, Fea?
Yeah, you're in the ballpark. That's all right. I don't even remember.
Yeah. So. And he says, right before he's about to battle him, he sort of, or he goes over, or even before, he's like, before he kind of goes over to the Emperor, he sort of goes to Shani and says, as long as I breathe, I'll love you. I will love the same thing he sort of said to her before. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of his last essence, I think, of who he was.
Yes, exactly.
And that was him sort of accepting that this is the only way. And now, again, this is the great thing about Denis Villeneuve is, is he saying that, or is he making that decision because he knows this is the only way that it will save her? Because all the futures of what he sees is like, if he stays with her, or if he stays with her, in the South, or if he doesn't become the Emperor, like if he doesn't do all these things, like she's going to die. Every other way she's going to die. Is he doing it because this is the only way she lives? Like maybe it's like to get her to hate. She has to hate me is the only way that she'll survive. And he doesn't want her to ever die or lose her or whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting. He's stuck between these decisions, but I think at the very end, sort of when he becomes this emperor, this kind of towering figure, quite literally, because the prior emperor bows to him, he makes that sort of decision that I'm rolling with this. He's not stuck between being a false prophet and a Messiah, or a man and a god, or a life and death. There was an interesting, there's that moment when he's where they're looking at they've gone south, and they're in the Fremen place with the fundamentalists, and there's that temple that's has water and then has sand, and there's this they show how they get the water of life. They kill, and it's it's such an interesting moment because water represents life, and the sand represents death. And the sandworm is in the sand, gets captured, gets brought to the part of life, but then gets killed.
Yeah.
Suck out the blood, or the water,
whatever it is,
water of life, the blue, the neon blue. And then when he drinks it, he is literally laying between those two spaces.
Yeah, between life and death.
Oh,
I love that.
And they're like, he's almost dead. And they're like, no, he's like, why would you do this? You know what I mean? And it's like when, he's literally, and then Javier Bardem's like, no, he's breathing, he's good. It's like he's fighting. He's like, it's like, you're literally killing him. You're literally killing him.
I'm just picturing Javier Bardem having a smoke with Philip Seymour Hoffman every time you do the impression. It's so great.
Oh no. Yeah, man, that was man. bringing up Cy Hoffman. I mean,
Cy Hoffman. R.I.P. to a real one.
Yeah, if you guys want to hear that, if you guys haven't heard that story, go back and listen to our what episode was that?
That was
Twister.
Twister, yeah.
Go listen to our Twister episode.
Cy Hoffman's greatest role. Dusty.
Yeah, or his greatest role, almost meeting me.
Yes. His greatest disappointment.
Yeah. So there's other things in this film I wanted to touch on, or films, and choices. We talked about a lot about the production design, like the camera work in his movies is always just brilliant. He gives, like I mentioned last week, he gives a lot of time for things to breathe, to digest. You're I don't need to like take this in right now and be like, well, even in these battle scenes, it's like the battle scenes aren't so chaotic. Even the hand to hand, it's like, it's not like, there are lots of cuts, but it's not like, like
you can see all the moves.
Yeah, you can see the moves, the battle scenes with like the, where they're taking out like those kind of choppers. They're moving from place to place. You're with them. Mm-hmm. There are longer shots. There's long panning shots. Then there's the Harkonnen planet.
Yeah.
Which is it wasn't until halfway through the scene when we're introduced to Austin Butler, his name is Fade Rautha.
Fade Rautha, yeah.
Fade Rautha.
Yeah.
The Harkonnen nephew. And he is, when we're sort of introduced to him, and he's just this like psychopath obsessed with pain and killing. And it wasn't until like halfway through this scene, which is like, it was like a gladiator-esque type of moment.
Very.
I'm like, everything's black and white.
Yep.
Didn't notice it until halfway through the scene, and go back and watch it now. And I'm like, oh, that is brilliant. And he literally goes from the Baron walks, and he's kind of skin tone. And as he walks out into the sunlight from like the shadows, he literally goes black and white. And that was just such a great choice.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to what we talked about in the last episode with the visual inspiration for Villeneuve and this dramatic effect of light and shadow. And nowhere more pronounced than on the Harkonnen world, because it is in black and white, and their skin tones are so white. They're shaved, bald. Everything else is black, and there's blood on the sand. And yeah, it's this wicked stylistic choice to go full black and white there. And I love that. Yeah.
The interesting thing was the way they shot that was they created everything in black and white, and then they shot it in negative, or I can't remember the whichever way they did it. It was like you couldn't go back, right? So again, like a lot of times in film, you'll shoot in color because it'd be like, okay, I'll shoot in color and then I'm going to color correct it later. Or every film does color corrects and stuff, but they wanted to, it was a very obvious choice that they were shooting, that this scene was going to be in black and white. And, once they did it, it was like, well, we can't shoot, unless we go back and shoot the whole thing again, where what they have was black and white. And yeah, it works so perfectly in the moment in the film. The world is black and white.
Yeah.
It's like there's no gray, right? We're just talking about how he's between life and death. Paul is sort of in this gray area of being the Messiah, of being human, of loving Shani to sort of leaving her, and but there's nothing like that at the Harkonnen planet. It's black and white.
Yeah, that's right.
And then further to that, I would assume in the books, because they kind of reference this in something I've read about it, where it was the sun is a black sun, or the way the sun, it's it's a white sun or whatever. It makes everything white. And so it's it makes sense in a story aspect, but then it also makes sense. And then there's also, there's strong references to, we sort of see it in the next scene, because they have that battle. And then when he's sort of all right, he goes to see the Baron, and he's like, I should, he was like, that guy wasn't drugged, I should kill you. Or whatever. Oh, nephew, no, you proved to me that you're whatever.
You do a good Skarsgård, by the way. You got a good Skarsgård.
And then he says, so he's like, I want you to do the planet or whatever. Take the planet, Iraqis. And he says, that's your real birthday gift. And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, great, amazing. I'll do that.
Great, I'm going to go kill someone, eat their liver. Yeah.
Sort of the next scene is him getting ready to leave or whatever, and it's these wide shots of like Imperial, and it's like it strikes not just Star Wars and the Imperial stuff of Star Wars, but what Star Wars reference, which is like the Triumph of the Will, which is the Nazi propaganda film, which is like all these shots. Anybody not familiar, in the 30s that the Nazi party used to like kind of build morale in Germany and amongst the Nazi party, where it's like just thousands and thousands of Nazi soldiers kind of like lined off marching, like listening to Hitler and these mesmerizing massive shots. Of just like so many people.
Yeah.
And, and even they do that. That's the Harkonnen do the thing, right? Yeah. Where it's like, it's not so much
it's not quite the Heil 5.
but it's getting there.
It's getting there.
So again, it's these cultural references that make these moments hit differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just a quick sort of tidying up of the narrative. You had a question about sort of Paul's decision as it related to Chani and being the emperor and that moment, that ultimate moment. So I think sort of what he's compelled at that moment. He has to take the throne. He has to do what he does because he's killed the Harkonnens now. He has attacked the emperor. He has made himself an enemy of the rest of the great houses.
Correct.
Because there is a larger political structure that you don't get introduced to there. But there are other great houses with power and things like that. So he has now made himself enemy of them because they have refused to accept him as ruler.
Yeah, they say that when Josh Brolin says they haven't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he has made himself persona non grata amongst the Landsraad, as it's called. And so at that point, he really doesn't have a choice. Like the Fremen will die if he doesn't assume the throne. If he doesn't, and to do that, to consolidate power, he has to marry the princess. It's a tale as old as time. You see it in Game of Thrones. You gotta have the right wedding, marriage match to consolidate power and bring your forces together. So he does that, and he has to set Chani aside publicly. She remains his concubine in the book. So the end of this, like you see her sort of walking off on her own, kind of leaving him. She is not pleased with his decision, and nor is she pleased in the books, but she understands it politically.
Okay.
And remains his concubine. Now, if they come back and do Dune Messiah as a third Dune film, in the book chronology, 12 years has passed. So maybe in that time they've reconciled, so you don't get that, as far as I recall, you don't get that image of her walking away and leaving him. She regrets but understands the choice from a strategic point of view. Chani is like a great strategist and a great military thinker in the books.
Yeah, that's okay.
And she's clearly, she's clearly, you get that in this. She's clearly very capable. She is a respected warrior, and the fighting style. You talked about how good the fight scenes are in this and how clear and how you can see the moves. It's not frenetic, it's not hectic or blurred or anything like that. And they actually do a pretty good job of capturing what is described in the books as the fighting style. The way Paul fights in particular, you see him executed a few times where he's taken down and he does like this little leg lock and like trip up, and the way he moves and stuff like that is all very reminiscent of how it's described in the books. And they do a nice job of translating the martial arts style of the written word to the screen, which is a hard thing to do. But it's a testament to both Herbert, the way he described it and how you were able to visualize it, and then how Villeneuve was able to capture it as well.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think in the film world, it doesn't work if she's like, yeah, cool.
No. And I like that
there's
starkness. A couple of moments that they do with her. Like when she's teaching him how to walk properly on the sand, he's like, oh, in the videos I've seen, and she just looks at him. He's like, sorry, carry on. And there's this nice kind of don't fucking mansplain to me, man. Like, I do this for a living. You're just a visitor here, So I like that they get that in there. And there is some slight touches of modernity in this, in the way they talk to each other and stuff like that. Enough to make it not feel wooden and old fashioned. Yeah. But not so much that it feels inauthentic. I really like that.
No, their relationship is great. And that's why it's the driving force of the film, I think.
Yep. It's America. It's amazing that they didn't fall in love offset. And, Tom Holland and her didn't have this acrimonious split. And
Tom Holland, we haven't done anything Tom Holland based.
Maybe we oughta.
But
he seems a good guy.
Yeah, I like Tom Holland.
Yeah, I feel like you have beer with him.
He's Spider-Man. No, he's sober.
Is he?
Yeah, he did a podcast about how he was like, essentially, like many of us, it's like, you're at for the holiday. He tells a story about when he was like home for the holidays a couple of years ago and was just like, one bear turns to two bears and like that classic. And then he just was like, I didn't like how I was feeling. And then he realized he was a full blown alcoholic. So he just went like cold turkey. And so he wouldn't have a beer with him, but
I would enjoy a cup of coffee. Sit
let's
down.
have a cup of coffee. Yeah, Tom Holland.
Yeah.
Hit us up, man.
Yeah, buddy. We'll have an espresso. It'll be cool.
Yeah. Tom Holland. Zendaya, man. She is so, we talked about,
she's great.
Anna de Armas last week.
We did.
Or sorry, not last week, a couple weeks ago, like 3 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
with Blade Runner 2049.
Correct.
And how captivating she is, man. Zendaya, there's something about her. She's got such a unique look.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, she's stunning, but she's not, it's like, she's such a great actor. And it's like, Denny Villeneuve has this ability to get these subtle looks that these actors give.
Yes.
It's so subtle. And it's so like, and, the Baron does like the moment of the Baron when he's like stars guys. It's like, it's like, and what about the Harkonnen? Or what about the Fremen? You should kill them all. And he's just like sinks down and it's like oil.
Into his petroleum bag.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And then it's again, like these looks, like she gives great looks and these moments. And Austin Butler too. He just like, as he's coming off of Elvis. He went from Elvis to this.
Yeah.
And such a difference, obviously, in performances and characters.
Yeah, maybe a little.
And he was like known. Everybody sort of gave him shit, like for he did Elvis for so long. Everybody's like, oh, you still have the Elvis voice. And when he was doing press and stuff, and it was just like, yeah, like I'm trying to get rid of it and whatever. He's like couldn't because he's just like he was just so embedded himself in the character.
Right.
And when he was cast and came on with this, it's like you got to portray a psychopath. But like you also have to pay. But he also has this weird thing where he has this like sort of like this honor about him, the character, right? Like, yeah, he kills people. He just has sex slaves and kills them, and there's like, but like he also has this like, when he kills the Harkonnen or
the last of the Atreides in that gladiatorial scene.
Yeah, and he sort of says, that you fought well, Atreides.
He takes his shield off too. Because the other guy doesn't have a shield. Yeah,
like he has. So again, as evil as he is, he has this interesting part of his character that makes us go like, oh, I want to know more about him instead of just like, I am like all bad and I'm going to cheat to win and I'm going to, you know what I mean? He's great in that.
And that makes him an effective counterpoint to Paul. And you need that. You need that polar opposite and yet that is equal, if not greater. That, it has to be that way. And so
100%.
He needs to be someone, he can't be like the wrestling villain. Like he can't be Ric Flair, who needs the ref's back turned so that he needs to be just as formidable and just as great of a warrior. And he is just as Paul is being genetically bred through this eugenic process of the Bene Gesserit. So is he.
Yeah.
He is their other option. They have plans within plans. They don't just put all their eggs in one basket. They've got other schemes, plans, schemes, and he is one of those potential options. In fact, the ideal situation was that Lady Jessica was supposed to have a girl with Duke Leto Atreides, and that girl was to be wed to a Harkonnen boy.
Oh.
And then from that, the prediction was that they would produce the Kwisatz Haderach. They were sort of building to that. Now, Paul sort of jumped the line and did turn out to be, but there was another potential one, so to speak, and it was our boy Austin Butler.
Austin Butler. Yeah. I'm interested to see where this story can go. I know you mentioned too that the daughter, Lady Jessica's daughter, is born in the books.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting portrayal in part 2.
Yeah.
And where this relationship with this kind of growing fetus and like
a fully aware fetus. It's such a bizarre concept. What a hell,
Sister, your sister is like says this and communicating with Paul, and it's like I'm very interested to see sort of her role or what that kind of importance is. And like, is she really the Messiah? And he's sort of I don't know. This is obviously questions for people that have read the books, but we don't have to get too far into that.
We could speculate how they would do it in the movies, though, because there might be a little change here or there. You don't quite know, and so if they do come around to doing a third Dune, it'll be interesting because she will have to be in there. Paul and Chani have a son in the first book, though he does die very abruptly in the battle for Arrakis. But then they have other children thereafter. They have a boy and a girl in the second book. Yeah, so there are heirs to the Atreides line, and the third book is actually called Children of Dune, and it spends more time with them. They are the central characters of the story. So.
Oh, that'd be interesting. I wonder moving forward. Denis Villeneuve has come out and said when he was doing press for Dune Part II, he's like, yeah, like he didn't so much say like I'm done, but like I have to take a break.
Sure,
because like these are just massive undertakings, right?
Totally understand.
He spent years making the first one, years making the second one, and that's what it's going to take to make a third one.
Yeah.
And then potentially, and what studios are like. They're not going to say, all right, you just do one more and you're done. It's going to be like, we need you to now make, another, essentially Dune 2, Part 1, Part 2.
Yeah. And there's going to be a TV show, and, so you got to be part of that. And you basically have to become the Kevin Feige, is it, of the MCU?
Yeah. Yeah. Or the Peter Jackson of like Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Like, bringing him back and doing like... So I don't know. I think it's, but I think he sort of walked that back a little bit recently, and he's sort of been like, yeah, maybe I will do a third one sooner rather than later. So that'll be interesting to look out for. But we've talked, almost 2 hours now, over an hour and a half on Dune, and we could keep talking about it.
We could have watched half of one of these movies.
That is correct. But that's so funny because when we did other movies like Following and Enemy, like we almost talked as long as the movies.
Yeah.
Whereas this, we've done 2 episodes and we're not even halfway through one of the movies.
Yeah.
But we have to get to the question that I'm sure everybody watching and listening want to know. Is this a hell of a picture? Are both of them hell of a pictures? Could they be one be a hell of a picture, one not be a hell of a picture? David, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so we have sort of walked around this a little bit through the episode. Is it one movie in 2 parts? Are they 2 movies? Whatever. If I am forced to judge Part 1 in a vacuum, I will say, is it a hell of a picture? Not quite. But I don't think it's fair to. And this is my opinion. I think you take a contrary position. But by its nature, it is the less interesting part of the story. And this is meant to be one story. It's not like Fellowship. It's not Two Towers. It's not Return of the King. This is like if you did Fellowship in 2 movies. And that would be a weird thing to judge. You know what I mean? So that first half is always going to be at a disadvantage.
It's my favorite part of Fellowship.
Well, and Fellowship is my favorite of those movies, by the way.
Me too.
Yeah, when we talk about Lord of the Rings, which I'm sure we will at some point,
I love Fellowship.
It has the most heart. It has the most heart. Absolutely. But yeah, you'd be putting the first half of that movie at a real disadvantage if you talked about them separately. Part 2 has the meatier bit. And if I'm forced to consider it alone, I will say Part 2 is unquestionably a hell of a picture. But as I have stressed, these are one movie. It is not Dune 1 and Dune 2. It is Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2. They are one. And as one, they are a hell of a picture.
Okay. So you give it the hell of a picture nod as one film. Well, that's good because they're both hell of a pictures for me.
Excellent.
Both Part 1 and Part 2 are hell of a pictures. I will give the slight nod to Part 2.
Sure.
As we discussed, and like you were saying, the second part of a story really needs to be the best part of a story.
It would have to be.
It has to be the strongest part.
Yeah.
We're familiar with the characters. We're familiar with the language, with the world, with the environment, with everything, and we can just build on top of that and create something really astounding, which I think Denis Villeneuve did, and I think he laid the foundation for that in Part 1. Which I think is still, stands on its own. I think the great thing about Part 1, if you had to kind of pick something better about Part 1 than Part 2, was that I think it's more of a standalone film than the second film.
Okay.
Like I feel like you watch the second film and there's more, if you were just to watch them like you said, like separately, like Part 1, I feel like is slightly more complete in a sense of like it ends and you're like, okay, he's gone to live with the Fremen and like the Harkonnens are taking over the world, and that's that.
It's bleak.
Yeah, it's a dark ending.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's, you know.
But I guess the ending of the second one's kind of bleak too.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
like
about to go on, you know.
He's like, I now am the emperor. And he's like, wait, the other house is like, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
That's not true. And
Yeah.
he's like, well, now we're going to go to a bloody jihad war and billions of people are going to die.
Yep.
But that's not what we're seeing. Either
Chipper
way,
stuff.
Where
Chipper stuff.
They're both hell of a pictures. Denis Villeneuve has gone 3 for 4.
Yeah, he's batting 750.
He is an incredible filmmaker. I can't wait for him. 3 for 4 from our ratings. Like he didn't get a hell of a picture for. But I guess you would say the first one isn't. But you're saying as one film.
I look at them as one film. So if you want to break it into halves, they both have to be, I guess, in a sense. But if I was forced to consider it as one movie, I would say it's just incomplete. But again, like I give that with the caveat that it is meant to be what it is. It is perfect at what it is. It does perfectly what it is supposed to do, which is set up. So I think what we can say, rather than make this complicated, that Villeneuve goes 3 for 4, or if you want to look at it as 1, 2 for 3,
2 for 3,
whatever.
Right. 2 for 3, yeah.
Yeah. Love Villeneuve.
He's great. And Enemy was close. When we talked about Enemy, that was close to being hell.
Not for me. I think it was closer for you than it was for me. Like I said, I liked a lot about that movie.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily I don't feel very compelled to go back and rewatch it a bunch.
Right.
It's interesting enough to watch again, but not out of love, I would say. So
Gotcha.
I think you have a different, stronger sort of attachment to that thing.
And we could go down the road of some Denis Villeneuve stuff later on too, because he has some other bangers. Arrival, Sicario, Prisoners, which I know you haven't seen.
I have not, but I'm interested.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
But that's not where we're going next week. We're going to kind of take a little break from Denis Villeneuve. We've done 4 of his films, 3 if you think Dune is one movie. But
this guy, am I right?
Am I right? But we're gonna pivot, and we're gonna try to find a through way to pivot to our next film, and we're gonna do that through one of the most interesting characters in this film. And he's not the main character, although we do love Timothée Chalamet. And it's not some of the old guard, the Josh Brolins or the Javier Bardems. We're gonna go and pivot with Austin Butler, one of the really up and comers Hollywood stars.
Right there with Glenn Powell.
Man, Glenn Powell. Let me tell you.
After seeing Twisters, I am very much a convert to the Glenn Powell.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
So we're not gonna pivot into the Elvis, where he got an Oscar nomination. That might be too easy. We're gonna go to another role that he portrayed as kind of a secondary role, but really put him on the map. And this really speaks to the filmmaker. We're gonna pivot to Tarantino and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where Austin Butler plays a degenerate member of the Manson family.
Yeah.
Which was the first time I've seen him or to my knowledge that I'd seen him on film.
Yeah.
He has kind of this supporting role, but he plays it incredibly. And we're going to talk about some Tarantino stuff. My goat of goats. I think he's the greatest filmmaker of all time. I think he's amazing. So, but we're gonna talk about some Tarantino stuff.
Can't wait, man. It feels like we were always coming to this. We've been doing great directors, and there was no way to do that without doing,
especially the modern ones. Yeah,
certainly, yeah. And you have to give Tarantino his due, and we need to talk about it. And yeah, it was the first thing that I had seen Austin Butler in, though I didn't know I was seeing him at the time. And he's actually in like one of my favorite parts of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I won't discuss now. We'll save that. But yeah, again, didn't know it was him, but he is a critical aspect of my favorite part of that movie.
That is great, man.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, let's so get caught up on that and rewatch it. It's his most recent, his 9th film. Now he said he's only going to do 10 films,
which is cool. I like the idea of a man who knows when to cut it, when to end.
Unlike us with this podcast, because we've been talking about Dune for 2 hours.
We're gonna linger.
We're gonna linger, but so be sure to stick. Come back next week. We're gonna be talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then we're gonna get into some Tarantino stuff. So that'll be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
All right. So for David Hollinsworth, my name is Andrew Bartlett, and this has been another episode of Hell of a Picture.